Ian Nicholas for another episode of Beyond the Whistle podcast, joined by my co-host Dylan Pescatore with a great guest today, known best for his work with the Naval Academy as their play-by-play man for 33 Varsity Sports. It's Pete Medhurst. Pete, how are you doing during this quarantine at home? You just did a quick update for the sports just a few minutes ago, so you're staying active at home. But how's this whole pandemic impacted your career, and how have you been adjusting to it?
Well, Ian, Dylan, good to be with you guys, first of all. And, you know, obviously, when you work in a major market, we were talking about this as broadcasters a while back. Had something like this happen 20 years ago, there's no way we pulled this off working from home like everybody has been. We didn't have the Comrex accesses outside of having a Marty Yagi antenna where you had to be a certain distance away from your business, or if you were in the infant days of getting an ISDN line, which at that time was incredibly expensive, basically you were using a telephone line to do all your communications from an arena, and that would have been very difficult for update anchors, talk show hosts. We've all got Comrexes. We all sound like we're in the studio, and outside of a stray dog barking here and there, or a kid coming in with some of our hosts, our guys been able to pull it off pretty good. Quite frankly, when you think about it, you're saving gas, you're saving on parking. You can't park anywhere in the District of Columbia without paying significant coin for it. So at least from that standpoint, you know, there's some substantial savings there on some of the expenses, but certainly you miss being around the guys every morning. I mean, the Junkies obviously have been on the radio for 23 years now, and one of the top rated shows in the DC market for several of those years. And you miss the camaraderie with the guys. I mean, you're talking to them down the line and things of that nature, but it's not the same as the general interactions. But, you know, those are the things that you miss right now because you don't get that interaction. And obviously Navy's lacrosse season, spring sports season ended pretty much after 5 games. Yep. So there were no games to broadcast all spring. For me, there were no horse races to announce. So it's been a pretty boring time. And in fact, perfect title of your podcast. I mean, I referee basketball and I umpire fast pitch softball, and there were no whistles to blow throughout the spring for basketball or anything like that. I'm actually getting back to umpiring today for the first time since March. So it's been a long time between balls and strikes, but we'll see how we do coming up later on this evening.
Well, Dylan plays in a summer baseball league, so he's going to be back in the swing of things as well. That starts up this weekend. So we're all starting to get back in the swing of things with athletics slowly working their way back into our lives. Well, let's go back to your childhood. So from a young age, it seemed like you were very interested in sports broadcasting. There's numerous stories that you were 5 years old, you'd sit in front of your TV and pretend to be an announcer with a tape recorder. But you seem to have your life in order pretty early. You wanted to be a sports broadcaster or a manager at a fast food restaurant. But you landed with sports broadcasting. Who were some of the people or the voices of TV and radio early in your life that inspired you to get into the business?
So I was very lucky, you know, and you're right. I mean, from the time I was 5, I would sit in front of the TV. My grandparents gave me a Panasonic tape recorder. And I would sit in front of the TV and act like I was broadcasting games. I'll never forget Thanksgiving 1975. My grandfather basically had to lift me up from the living room to bring me to the table for Thanksgiving dinner because I was broadcasting, you know, Roger Stahl back in the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day. In my childhood, we were very lucky because I think to this day, when you looked at NBC's roster and CBS's roster, especially a football play-by-play, it was the golden age of play-by-play. We grew up with some of the greatest examples of how to do this on a daily basis. I look at, obviously, Pat Summerall, who worked with Tom Brookshire before he worked with John Madden with CBS. And being a Redskin fan growing up, we always got the CBS games. So, you know, Redskins, Cowboys, you got Pat Summerall, Tom Brookshire, and then Pat Summerall and John Madden for all of those big games those teams played in the 70s and 80s. NBC had Dick Enberg and Merlin Olsen as its top team. They had Charlie Jones as basically did a lot of their West Coast games and did the Fiesta Bowl. People forget, you know, I mean, you had Bryant Gumbel working their pregame show. CBS had Brent Musburger anchoring theirs. CBS's roster was amazing. Vern Lundquist, Vin Scully, Lindsey Nelson. I mean, it was a who's who of play-by-play men. So every time you watched a game, you got a free education on how to do it. And while I don't know if Pat's style would be appreciated as much nowadays as it was back then, very understated, let the moments speak for themselves on TV. From that standpoint, it was a free education every time out. So it was a blessing to watch all the great announcers that CBS and NBC had growing up, and it really was inspiring. To make you want to get into the business because you wanted to be just like those folks. Keith Jackson doing college football. I mean, I still go back. Joe Miller and I do a college football podcast, and we go back and watch a lot of the old games. And Keith Jackson in his heyday was just fabulous doing college football, did Monday Night Baseball, was just exceptional. And again, a free education every time you turn the TV on.
Ian and I always talk about our favorite announcers and how we want to take some stuff from them to bring into our work. Were there some when you were a kid that you could just name off the top of your head?
Definitely growing up, when I first got into this, doing the first play-by-play I did was Pocomoke High School basketball back in 1990. And, I essentially, you have to be yourself first. You have to develop your own style. There are some traits, maybe from a preparation standpoint, that will help you along the way. I tried it first. I wanted to be understated in a way like Pat Summerall was, because he was the class of the business at that time, whether it was football or tennis or golf, whatever he was doing for CBS. And eventually you start to figure out your audience and you start to figure out some things that will work. And, basically the thing I try to do is I try to relate to the audience as much as possible. I do as much homework as I possibly can. I always, Doc Emmerich, the thing that makes him great, he always has a great story about a player somewhere along the way, something that you probably have not heard about that player. And those are the kind of things that I try to uncover when I talk to kids, when I interview kids at the Naval Academy, that I can take if I'm broadcasting one of their events. The thing about it now for broadcasters, there is no excuse whatsoever to not be prepared now, because the internet gives you so many things that you can dig up on athletes, games from their high school life, stories that may encompass even back when they were youth league players. Obviously we know about Todd Frazier and his Little League World Series exploits and things of that nature when we're broadcasting games. So there's just so many things that you can uncover. And when you make that personal connection with your audience, for the most part, you have them from then on, because your credibility in their eyes rises up because they know that you've done your homework when you start to dig up that kind of stuff on athletes. And, while their families may have known about it, a lot of the other people, teammates, families of teammates, may not have known about that stuff. And obviously you've given the audience something that maybe they didn't have when they came to the broadcast.
And there's so much to prep for. I mean, with the advanced analytics, normal stories, personal stories, both teams' media markets, preparation can go any way you want it to go, and you can prepare any way you want with all the stuff that's at your fingertips. And you definitely are somebody who puts a lot of work into the industry. You balance a lot of responsibility at the Naval Academy, but before you got there, and obviously your work with the Nationals, you got your first job in the late 80s, or one of your first, at WNAV in Annapolis, where you got the job from the current play-by-play man of the Washington Wizards. How lucky were you to be able to keep your job in the media market of DC, Maryland area, but continue to grow your sports broadcasting resume?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Dave Johnson, who's the voice of the Wizards now, he was the voice of Navy Athletics back at that time, and I just graduated from high school. And he offered me 20 hours a week, basically, covering high school sports, including a high school sports show every Saturday morning. He didn't have to ask me twice. I parlayed that into being a high school sports stringer with our local newspaper as well. And I was able to carve out a fairly solid living at that time for an 18-year-old kid.
Wow.
And it was, it was lucky. There's no question about that. I think that's the first thing, because sometimes that path doesn't necessarily work for you, no matter how many podcasts and all the other internet stuff that we have available now. I mean, it's a lot of it is luck. I was lucky that someone like Dave was welcoming and became a mentor right away. Guys like Brett Friedlander, Al Hopkins at the Capital newspaper, Bill Wagner. Those guys have been friends for years. And those were the people that really got me started. Mark Ernay, who works at 1010 Wins now in New York. He and I broadcasted Pocomoke High School basketball together back in 1990. And we were just, every time we see each other, we joke about how our careers started basically in this little tiny brick shed building in Pocomoke City, Maryland, in the middle of an open field. The only thing that was there was this AM radio station, 540 WDMV. And but in that market, Pocomoke High School basketball was huge, and it was amazing to be able to cut your teeth doing that. And I parlayed that into going up Route 13, 30 miles to Salisbury, and they allowed me to start an all sports station from scratch on an AM station. And for the next 3 years, basically we do high school football, and during basketball season, whatever game I was refereeing at 4:30, I would broadcast the 6:30 game at that site. So that's really how I was able to carve it out. And I talk about this all the time. As a young broadcaster, especially, or anybody breaking into it, doesn't matter what age you break into it, you've got to be willing to leave your comfort zone. You got to be willing to go to market 145 or 265, like San Angelo, Texas. Because guess what? In San Angelo, Texas, you can find high school football that people in the community live and breathe every Friday night. It's a great place, to cut your teeth and learn from your mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. We all make mistakes in our industry, but if you don't get the reps, you really can't learn and correct your mistakes. So you've got to be willing to get out of your comfort zone a little bit, go to those smaller markets, and that's where you can really, especially now with the internet and social media, you can really set up a brand for yourself and go from there. And I was very lucky at that time to be able to do that. Started an all-sports station with the Sports Fan Radio Network, and Papa Joe Chevalier, your table's waiting right this way, was part of his intro every afternoon because I would do a show at night following that. So it was a lot of fun, but it helped me learn the sales aspect. It helped me learn play-by-play, talk show host. I learned all of those different things. And obviously that's what, springs you forward. I've been a program director and obviously a host and update guy and stuff like that. But the fact that I was willing to go to a small market and cut my teeth that way was absolutely huge.
Definitely.
I know that Ian and I can both relate on that preparation aspect in the high school game, where really we have a lot of information to give, not at the pro level though. So let's go to the play-by-play preparation. And this is something that we like to ask all of our announcers that we have on. Are you a stats guy? Are you a stories guy? How do you like to set up your board?
I think you have to get a feel for the right time to use both. I think there are opportunities for both, especially in Major League Baseball, doing the 15 Nationals games last year with Charlie Slows. Baseball gives you a little bit more time to, bring a story up and more importantly, give you time to finish the story. Some sports, you don't have that kind of time. Some sports like basketball, fast moving, hockey, basically it's a stat nugget and boom, we're on to the next play, the next face off, the next inbound. So you have to use both, but I don't think you can get hung up in yourself going, man, I've got these 5 nuggets and I've got to get them in all, right now. Because what happens is you find yourself in baseball like the 5th or 6th inning going, okay, Ryan Zimmerman's up. Now there's ball 1. And you really don't have anything that you haven't said if you use them too fast. So you've got to space all of that stuff out. And especially, I think the challenge for any Major League Baseball broadcast, when you have 162 games plus playoffs to broadcast, can you imagine the amount of story searching you do? And now, granted, is you're being around the team helps you develop and cultivate some of those stories. But when you first, like last year when I was doing these games for the first time, you're in search of a lot of information because you don't want to repeat it over and over again, because even the audience figures you out at that point. They figured you looked up 2 or 3 things and that's all you can say. So there's so many tools that are available to you now, as you mentioned, with the advanced analytics. You bring those up, especially if it's something involving a streak one way or the other. use the statistical information to back it up. Don't just say the guy's struggling and leave it at that, because that makes you sound like a talk show host, not a play-by-play guy. The audience then thinks you're kind of crapping on the home team guy or something like that. But if you say, hey, he's hitting 198 over his last 27 games, struggling against right-handed pitching, that's where that stuff really comes into play when you're trying to back up either something that's going really, really positive for a player or something that's going really, really negative for a player, pitcher, a fielder, something like that. So I think you can't set out a pattern. I'm going to go in and I'm going to say this story then, I'm going to say that story then, because you don't know during the course of a free-flowing game when those opportunities are going to strike to be able to do that. And that's something as a broadcaster, you just have to have a feel for. Is this a moment I can get this in? And then when you feel like you have that moment, go ahead and stick it in there.
Yeah, you can't force something that doesn't fit, but you have to be prepared for any situation that might arise during a game. So you obviously do so much great work with the Nationals over the past year, but with work with the Naval Academy, with 33 different varsity sports, there really isn't a sport that you haven't been able to touch on. And versatility every sports broadcaster needs to have. But when you're doing these swimming games with your color man being an Olympian, or you're doing a horse race, or something that the traditional broadcaster doesn't usually have, how hard is it to adjust to a game or prepare for a game where you really are walking in blind, and compared to a sport like football, which you've watched since Thanksgiving morning when you were 5 years old? So how challenging is that? But how have you embraced that challenge over the years, calling sports that you've never really watched or never really seen before?
I'm blessed at the Naval Academy. Scott Strassmeyer and his entire sports information staff, they're the best in the industry. They treat all 33 sports the same, men and women. They give it the same attention. It's one of the biggest, obviously, in the country. There's only like 3 schools that have more sports on the Division I level than the Naval Academy. So all those sports are important to all those athletes, those coaches, and all those parents and families and friends that are watching. And it deserves your attention as a broadcaster. Thanks to that sports information staff, they give me an amazing head start with all the great work that they do. And I was relating this story to somebody else the other day. I'll never forget the first time I did a water polo match. And if somebody ever tells you to do water polo, do it. It's 1 hour. It's exciting as heck. And, before the game, I went to the referees and I said, hey, first time I've broadcast in a water polo match. I said, but I've officiated other sports. I got a couple questions. I said, what are a couple of the main mechanics as officials that you're going to use during the game that will note what kind of foul something is or whatever? And they were very nice about it, because they don't want you on the air going, oh, that's a bad call, when you don't really know what you're talking about. And obviously the audience wants to know, why was the whistle blown? Why was a goal disallowed? Something of that nature. So for the sports that I haven't had a whole lot of experience participating in, I go to the officials, because they're number one. They're going to give you a lot of the information that you don't know that occurs during the course of the game. I did it with women's lacrosse, because women's lacrosse and men's lacrosse are two completely different sports. You run in front of the goal at the wrong time as a defender, tweak, the whistle blows. Girl could be running 30 yards, nobody on her. Somebody runs in front of the crease, boom, shooting space violation. And I'll never forget when I first started broadcasting women's lacrosse, I was like, man, this girl's got a wide open run to the goal. Why are they blowing the whistle on her, making her come back for a free position shot? But, I spent some time with the referees to understand why they call some of the things that they call, why they blow some of the whistles they do during the course of the match. And that helps you understand the game. And more importantly, it helps you translate the game to the people watching, because they're only getting, tunnel vision screenshot of what you're seeing on TV. And in some cases, obviously with radio, you're trying to give them the entire description. But as a broadcaster, I think you owe it to the audience to take those steps to try and understand the sport as much as possible. I tell young broadcasters all the time, somebody wants to offer you an opportunity to do something, even though you've never played it, you may have never heard of it. Do it. Take the opportunity, because you never know when you're going to get a live microphone from somebody else. And as I said, there are so many tools available to you now that help you prepare for these games. It's not like 30 years ago where if somebody stuck you in the middle of a water polo match, you're like, hey, shoot some scores, and that's kind of it. There's so much out there that's available now from a preparation standpoint. It just makes it a lot of fun, and we're blessed at the Naval Academy to have as many sports as we do, to get to know some of the most amazing student athletes in the world, accomplishing what they do with the time constraints that are on them, what the coaches accomplish with the time constraints that are on them. It's not like a civilian school where they can practice anytime they want. They got a window in the afternoon. They got to fit everything into that window. And it's amazing to see the kind of success that the Naval Academy has all across the board, with a lot of those challenges that come to their student athletes.
So as you just brought up, as the Naval Academy, when they think of the Naval Academy, they think of respect, and they think of the work that they do, and we're so proud of it out of their country. Do you feel like an added pressure calling games for them, almost like another eyes watching in the back of your head almost?
I don't know if I would call it pressure, because as I've described to people for years, this is not a job. We're not, in terms of pressure, we're not trying to find cures for cancer. We're not trying to find cures for COVID-19. We're simply talking about sports. We're simply describing athletic events on TV and radio to the best of our abilities. And but I think what happens is, whether it's the Naval Academy or anywhere else, you have a responsibility to the audience, and in particular, these student athletes become very special because what they're signing up for. Sure, they're signing up to participate in a Division I athletic experience, but they're also signing up to defend our freedom for at least 5 years following graduation from the academy. Some of these young men and women go on to be tremendous leaders in our country in so many different fields. I know one of our basketball players right now is a doctor. And every time I see him on social media talking about medical issues, I'm like, man, there's number 22 right there. Now he's in somebody's operating room being a surgeon. You're just so proud of these young people, because you know what it took for them to get where they're going. So, I mean, whether it's the Naval Academy or any other school or professional, I don't know if you feel any added pressure, but you have even that much more respect for those student athletes and their families, because what they've gone through, because the families go through it as well. I mean, it's not like you can just roll up to the Naval Academy anytime you want and visit your kid. I mean, that's just not, it's not like a civilian school. You just can't roll in there anytime you want. They can't roll off campus anytime they want, go out into the city of Annapolis and do some things. So, they've overcome and set themselves up with incredible discipline to accomplish what they have. So I don't know if I would call it pressure, but by all means, the respect factor that I have for them, and you want to give your best because they're giving their best every time you see them.
So you've been with the Naval Academy for 23 years, so I'd assume you're pretty comfortable in your role there. But when you got the opportunity, and I know you probably get this question a lot, but when you got the opportunity to call radio for the Nationals last year for the first time in your career at the major league level, and I know you probably get this, but what were the emotions like when and I know it was a crazy week for you getting that opportunity, but for being in this industry for so long, calling so many different sports for so many different organizations, and then kind of getting the opportunity of a lifetime finally in the middle of your career, was that somewhat validation for you that all the hard work you've put in over your years had kind of paid off to your ultimate goal of a major league broadcast? Or just what was going through your mind when you were going through the preparation for those games?
I think if anybody tells you we may not outwardly seek validation, but it's a great word. We all think we're doing well. Steve Hers from the Montag Group brought up a great point a few weeks ago with a great book he's got that's out now. They represent some of the best broadcasters in the country. Mm-hmm. And, when you hear yes a lot, I have been fortunate to hear yes a lot and to hear you're really, really good. And I've not heard that you're really, really bad until you get an opportunity like I did with the Nationals. You wonder if you really belong, though, in that upper echelon. I mean, at the college level, I'm one of 130 Division I college football play-by-play men.
Yep.
But when you get to the pros, that list shrinks even that much more. So, yeah, I mean, there's no question that when that opportunity came, privately in that first couple of moments. I mean, it was really emotional. I'm a very emotional guy. I'm emotional for my kids, and they were playing college sports and high school sports. And I got a 12-year-old now, and she does stuff well playing and in school. I get really emotional about it, but that's just the way I am. And
Yeah.
They presented me with the lineup card and a game ball. I got the game ball sitting right up here on my desk with the authentic sticker right there from the very first game down in Atlanta. And for the PR department to think of me that way, they didn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. But to do that, I mean, it was a pretty emotional night for me. And ironically enough, the resume tape that I used to get that, I did the Cal Ripken World Series for several years. Mm-hmm. And I did a game between Japan and Mexico. And that is what I used for the resume tape that Charlie Slows, the voice of the Nationals, listened to, and immediately talked to his higher-ups and said, hey, you guys need to listen to this. And that's what I used as my resume tape that got me 15 Major League Baseball games this past year. A lot of it, as you all know, I mean, it's being in the right place at the right time. And, but you're thankful that, professionals like Charlie Slows and Dave Jagler would welcome you into their world and welcome you into their booth. Because I do believe there are people at our level at times that get very territorial about, their work and, almost seeing people as a threat to them in some capacity. So for them to be as welcoming as they were, Jack Hicks, our engineer, Dave London, and all the people that work at the Nationals, Dave and Jackie, who all, make that happen. And obviously the Lerner family, they could have nixed that at any time after the first couple of games. If they didn't like what I was doing, they could have said, hey, get somebody else in there. But I mean, people like Mike Rizzo, Davey Martinez, some of the great conversations that I had with them throughout the course of the season. It was really a very, very special, it made 2019 without question the greatest professional year of my life. I mean, I'm doing a Navy football team that ties the school record. Malcolm Perry gets drafted by the Miami Dolphins. Yeah. And within that year, I'm doing Major League Baseball. So it was just an unbelievable year. And the folks at the Nationals and my flagship station, 106.7 The Fan, where I work, because obviously our relationship with the Nationals, there's no question that helped. Our boss, Chris Keinert, and working with the Sports Junkies in the morning. They've been on the radio for 23 years. So life is all about relationships. And eventually those relationships can open some doors for you if you work hard enough to have those people believe in you. And I was lucky enough to have those people give me a shot. And at least for last year, things worked out. Unfortunately, I've already missed opportunities. I was supposed to go to San Francisco and Milwaukee this year to do some games, missed out on those opportunities. And I can't imagine I'll be doing any games in a 60-game season. I don't think anybody's taking any time off, but you never know. So I'll be ready when the skipper calls my number. That's for sure.
That's all you can be.
That's amazing to hear. And we talk about people that helped you in your career. And another person that is Dave Johnson, who gave you one of your first jobs in the late 80s at WNAV. Just tell me how great he's been to your career and how he just impacted you.
Somebody has to give you your first opportunity. And who that person is, to me, no matter how long your career is a very important person. And for Dave to do that and give me the opportunity that he did was, I'll be forever indebted to him, because if he doesn't give me the first chance, there's no guarantee, even if I go to, Tupelo, Mississippi, or Wichita, Kansas, or whatever market had an opening, there's no guarantee that you would ever get hired. And you've got to have somebody give you that first opportunity, give you the support, give you the feedback that you need to get better so you can continue on in your career. The best part is Dave has remained local. His work with DC United is fantastic. Basically he's been with DC United from day one, and a lot of people look at him as DC United itself. And he's obviously been able to do the Wizards for several years on the radio here in this market. He's an icon in our market. And, but I get my work ethic from Dave. I mean, all the, the hours that I work, I mean, I look at what Dave does. Dave will do a game. He's up at 5 a.m. in the morning doing sportscast for WTOP radio in this market. And then you may see him on Channel 4 that night anchoring the sports on Channel 4. I mean, the guy's work ethic is simply unbelievable. And that's what probably the thing I take from Dave more so than anything is I saw what worked for him. And I said, hey, if I mimic that work ethic, that seems to work. And that's the one thing I'll probably take from Dave is there is no chance on this planet anybody will ever outwork him as a broadcaster. And if you put in that kind of time and effort, there is a reward for it if you put in the time. And Dave's unbelievable from that standpoint. There's no question.
You have to have relentless work ethic to make it in this business, but give yourself credit. I saw a story that said your Fitbit says you only get 3.5 hours of sleep a night. So it seems like you're up almost all the day getting what you have to get done. So you do obviously a lot of different sports, but how are the pregame meetings varied from sports to sports? Because I know that's something I ask a lot of the broadcasters during the week when you're heading into a game, whether it's a football game with the head coach or maybe you're doing, I don't know, maybe just meeting up with another student athlete from Navy before a game. What are those pregame meetings like at the college level? And what do you get out of those meetings most? What do you head into those meetings wanting the most out of those interviews?
See, we're lucky at the Naval Academy. Kenny Amadalolo, especially, I mean, all of our coaches across the board. But take college football, for instance. Look, some of these places are bundled up like Fort Knox.
Yeah.
I mean, what's funny is when we go to Notre Dame and play, you look at their practice fields, they got it all walled off. You can't see through the fence or anything like that. At the Naval Academy, Monday through Wednesday, anybody on planet Earth can walk up to the practice field and watch practice.
Wow.
You know, Coach Niamadalolo tells his coaches, hey, go home on Sunday. Be fathers, be husbands, be family men. If we can't do this over 6 days, that 7th day is not going to, make that big of a difference.
Yep.
And I truly believe the access that we get at the Naval Academy is unprecedented in college athletics.
Mm-hmm.
Every Tuesday I meet with Coach Niamadalolo, the two coordinators, my color man, Joe Miller, our sideline reporter, Keith Mills. We all sit in a room with them and we have great conversations. There's a lot of trust in that room with those coaches. They tell us things that obviously can't go on the air, but it also gives us a way to be able to disseminate information to the audience as to why a certain player may not be playing or a certain player is playing. And they give us an amazing amount of trust. And as long as we don't betray that trust, they give us tremendous access. There's nothing like it. I talk to our basketball coach, Ed DeChellis, all the time. We text back and forth about stuff all the time during basketball season. He has been phenomenal to me. And obviously he's been a great help to both of my boys who are in college basketball coaching now. So all of our coaches, you mentioned swimming when I did swimming with Rowdy Gaines. Bill Roberts, John Morrison, our men's and women's swimming coaches, as unbelievably welcoming as possible. Anything you need to talk about their student athletes for the broadcast, and I think they understand it, especially in the Olympic sports. While the opportunities may not be there like football where it's every single Saturday, they respect the opportunity that they're given to be broadcast.
Yep.
And they work with you to give you the information that you need. But like I said, there are a lot of places that are not like the Naval Academy, and those broadcasters don't get the same carte blanche that I do in Annapolis. And for that reason, I think it allows our broadcast, I think, to be one of the best in college football every Saturday because of the great access that Coach Niamadalolo gives Joe, Keith, and myself each and every week. There's no question about it.
That's so great to hear. And I can even relate to that because this is the first year that we broadcasted girls hockey for our high school. And the coach couldn't be nicer to us because he just wanted their team out there. He wanted people to go to their games, and thankfully they did. And it gained popularity in our school. The last question for me is we brought up how much that you call sports, 33 different sports. What was the best place that you went? Just a place that shocked you or a place you saw on TV that you finally got to go to?
Well, as a kid growing up, watching the Notre Dame football report every Sunday morning with Lindsey Nelson, I'll never forget the first trip to South Bend and what it is The best way to describe South Bend is cult is a little bit too strong of a word because it can have some negative connotation.
Yeah.
But it is like you have landed somewhere else, because the campus at Notre Dame and the outskirts of Notre Dame and the city and everything like that, they're like two different places. When people get on that campus, man, it's like they turn into, like you're out there with the Lilliputians who sprinkle you with all the dust and everything like that. Being on that campus is everything that it's cracked up to be. When you see the building that obviously with what the, football Jesus on the side, as they like to refer to it as, it's a first-class operation at Notre Dame. From the time we get off the bus on Friday from our walkthrough, ushers standing out there, welcome to Notre Dame, and things of that nature. Everything that you hear about it, it's cracked up to be. There's no question. They've redone their press box now, which is flat out gorgeous. It's a great facility for us to broadcast from. I think, to be able to travel with Navy, 2 years ago, we traveled 26,000 miles. Wow. I mean, we went to Hawaii, we went to Colorado Springs. I mean, we're all over the place. So I've been able to go to Hawaii with the Naval Academy. Ironically, I was broadcasting a game at Navy. My son played his first college basketball game at the Division I level at Hawaii in a tournament there. He's won on the ESPN 24-hour marathon. They played Hawaii at 4 a.m, so I had to watch it here because I was doing a Navy game here. But, being able to travel to all the great places in our league and the American Athletic Conference. We played Notre Dame in Ireland back in 2012, so I got to go to Dublin, which means something to me because I was raised by my grandparents. My grandfather was from England. My grandmother was from Ireland. Mm-hmm. So to be able to go see her home country in its glory and to be there for a couple of days was very important to me for my family heritage. So, we're pretty lucky. We got a lot of great cities in the American Athletic Conference. You go to Florida, you go to Texas, you go to the Northeast. Obviously, the Army-Navy rivalry is what it is, and then going to Air Force out in Colorado Springs. There's nothing like trying to walk up steps in 5,200-foot altitude, feeling like you're about to pass out, and you're only halfway up the steps trying to get to the broadcast booth from the locker room. But we're very lucky. We're very lucky to do what we do in college athletics, and being able to go travel in a first-class manner, the best hotels, charter flights for football. There's nothing like it. And to have, like I said earlier, to be one of 130 is just a tremendous privilege, and one that I certainly don't take for granted.
It's funny you bring up Notre Dame because two things. One, yesterday we actually interviewed another Pete Pranica, who's the voice of the Memphis Grizzlies. He went to Notre Dame, and when we asked him why, even though they don't have a big broadcast program, he said, because I was a Catholic kid in the Midwest. So, and also in our small town of New Canaan, a kid just graduated, Drew Pine, a 4-star quarterback recruit, getting offers since 8th grade to go to D1 level, chooses Notre Dame because he loves Notre Dame. So that's definitely an amazing, magical place in South Bend. So our last question, which we ask every broadcaster, and you've done actually a great job, even without us asking for advice. You've given us 2 pieces of advice already for young broadcasters like us. But if you had one piece of advice, really like one thing that every young sports broadcaster should have in mind before starting their career in this business, what would you tell them to get them ready for this crazy world of sports broadcasting?
First thing I would tell you is don't be afraid. A lot of people, I was very lucky. In 10th grade, my speech teacher, the late Paul Vandenberg, pulled me aside after the first speech I ever gave in class. And he said, hey, he goes, you're different. He goes, what's the deal here? And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, you get up in front of class, and you love it. You're running it basically up to the podium and things of that nature. He goes, every time I call on other kids, they're like dreading it, walking up slow. And I told him, hey, since I was 5 years old, I've always wanted to be a radio broadcaster. And I would tell you, don't be afraid, because if you're afraid to speak in public, if you're afraid to speak in front of a lot of people, it's probably not the gig for you. There's plenty of great things you can do behind the scenes. If you're one of those people, you're comfortable being behind the scenes. There's a lot of great work that you can do, behind the scenes. But like I said, don't be afraid. If somebody offers you an opportunity, seize the opportunity. Tell them, hey, I appreciate it. Let's do it. I'll be there. Do the work that's necessary. Now, like I said, there's no reason not to be prepared, even if it's something you haven't done at all yet, because you've got amazing amounts of tools that are out there. So don't be afraid. And while I would say don't be too aggressive, is probably the best description. If you have a little bit of patience, and you do the things necessary, let your tape speak for itself. Go back and listen to your tape, and you'll hear the good, you'll hear the bad. You'll be like, hey, I got to make sure I don't do that again. Because I think a lot of times some people don't go back and listen to their stuff critically enough and sees the mistakes. I mean, what's interesting to me, like when I do horse racing, I'll go back and I'll watch those races, and stuff that you don't even realize you're doing in the middle of a race while you're doing it, you go back and listen to the tape and you're like, oh man, I did that, or I misidentified that horse, or something of that nature. Because if you learn from those mistakes, eventually your tape won't have any mistakes on them. Mm-hmm. And those are the tapes you want to be able to send to the people at the next level and the next level. And the other thing is like I said earlier, don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. You know, if you're in New Canaan, Connecticut today, don't be afraid to look at a job in, Nebraska tomorrow. It might be a great job. There are a lot of great jobs where, especially for young broadcasters, starting out doing high school football in a lot of these communities, it's a big deal. So like I said, it's a great opportunity for you to establish your own brand and do it on that level, which then helps you continue to move up each level. You never know. You could be doing high school in that community, eventually be doing college in that community. So don't have any fear, and have some patience, but always be prepared. Give every broadcast the respect it deserves. You could be having the most rotten day, but if at 7:00 you're expected to be courtside to broadcast a game, you got to make sure those 2.5 hours are the best part of your day. And sometimes doing a good job can lift you out of a doldrum that maybe you had earlier in the day, because we get to work in one of the greatest professions out there. I mean, we're broadcasting sports for a living. They're paying us to go to games. What's better than that? We hear the fans all the time talking about, they charge us so much and all this other stuff. Well, they pay us to go. What's greater than that? So those would be the key pieces of advice that I would always have. And make sure that you learn from your mistakes, because if you don't learn from your mistakes, you're going to keep repeating them. And that's obviously going to keep you from moving up the ladder eventually.
Self-critique is one of the biggest things in this industry. You have to go back and watch your old stuff if you want to improve, and you can never settle for what you're at right now. And I don't know about you, Dylan, but whenever a teacher calls on me in the middle of class to read something to in front of a class, I just eat that up. Hey, it's just an opportunity to get better. So
raise that hand, get it up there.
Raise the hand. I'll read the English passage. I'll find the page, and we'll get rolling. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Medhurst. This was an awesome episode of Beyond the Whistle, and we hope to hear you soon broadcasting more games for the Naval Academy, maybe more games in the MLB sooner rather than later. The sports world is opening back up. We don't know how it will, but hopefully we get to hear your voice sooner rather than later.
Ian, Dylan, good to be with you guys. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Another episode of the Beyond the Whistle podcast, joined by Dylan Pescatore. I'm Ian Nicholas. This was Pete Medhurst, and we'll see you for the next episode.
And I don't want to be left